Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, because we are on a Wednesday. Now, you might have noticed that we seem to be drained of colour tonight. I've been messing around with some of the features on this, and I'm not sure whether, do we want the black and white look, or shall we try going for something a bit more sepia-ish? So let's try tint. No, I don't like that. Don't like that either. No, not entirely sure about that. Let's try temperature. Oh, that's not bad. That's actually quite sepia-ish. I tell you what, we'll do the first bit of the show in sepia, and then we'll try it in pure black and white later on. Anyway, what are we reading? We're still reading Scottish Ghosts, which is an absolutely banging book. Really, really good. What are we drinking? Well, we've got the last of the subscription beers tonight. This is Beer Hut Brewing Company. Help is on the way. Oatmeal Stout, 4.2%. Doesn't have anything else to say, just oatmeal stout. Ingredients. What? I haven't got the light on. Goodness me. That's better. Wonder why I looked a bit in shadow. Ingredients: water, malted barley, oats, hops, yeast, allergens, including gluten, shown in bold. Store cold, drink fresh, and that's all it says. The Beer Hut Brewing Company. I'm just going to breathe left a glass a second. 32A Greencastle Street, Kilkeel, Down, BT 34 4BH. So it's from Northern Ireland. Very nice. So we will oatmeal stout. I like the sound of that. Oh, what do you know? We haven't even got into the show yet, and already we have a dead soldier. And run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Now, when I was down in Lidl yesterday, got a brand new bottle of the Western Gold Honey. The flavours of Western Gold Honey derive from oak barrels and the subtle sweetness of honey. That results, I'm sure it should be a comma, not a full stop. That results in a smooth and rich flavour profile one cannot resist. Enjoy straight, on the rocks, or mixed. Cheers. So, brand new bottle. Here we go. Oh, lovely. This is absolutely delicious stuff. As much as I do like the Arbracken, I'm going to try and keep that for the autumn. So, shall we get on mit the ghost stories? Selkirk. This story, which comes from the border town of Selkirk, tells of the strange disappearance of a cobbler. The secret of what exactly happened to him is known only to the dead. The cobbler was called Rabbi Hexspeckle, and he was, by all accounts, a skilled and industrious craftsman, quick and nimble with his fingers, who shod many a fine gentleman around the town of Selkirk. One particular morning, the cobbler was up before dawn, as was his habit, working on a pair of shoes, when a stranger came into the shop. It was unusual for anyone to come looking for service at such an early hour, but Rabbi Hexspeckle was a shrewd businessman and did not like to turn down any opportunity to make a little money. Accordingly, he greeted the stranger with his usual courtesy and asked how he could be of assistance. The man was looking for a new pair of shoes. The stranger was well dressed, but he had a certain air of decay about him, and there was something in his manner that the cobbler did not particularly take to. Nevertheless, Rabbi Hexspeckle politely obliged him by showing him a few samples of his work. The stranger pointed to one particular pair of shoes that were to his liking, and although the cobbler did not have any in the right size, he measured the stranger's feet and assured him that he would be able to make some in time for collection the next day. The stranger said that he would be picking up the shoes early, well before dawn, and the cobbler, although a little surprised, said that such an arrangement would be quite convenient. The sun had still not come up when the sun still had not come up when the mysterious stranger left the cobbler's shop. Rabbi Hexpeckle worked all day and long into the night completing the shoes for the stranger. When he had finally finished, the shoes were as fine as any. When he had finally finished, the shoes were as fine as any he had made. Congratulating himself on a fine job, he turned in for the night, hoping to catch a few hours of sleep before his customer returned. It was dark when the cobbler heard a knock on the door, waking him from his slumber. Rubbing his eyes, he pulled on some clothes and went to let his customer in. The stranger tried on the shoes with hardly a word. They fitted him beautifully, but he was far from fulsome in his praise for the good cobbler's efforts. He merely tossed a handful of silver coins at Rabbi Hexpeckle, turned round, and made for the door. The cobbler was intrigued by this eerie man. He wanted to see where he lived. The man was certainly not a familiar figure around the streets of the town. Unable to contain his curiosity, Rabbi Hexpeckle set off to follow the stranger, keeping at a safe distance. He followed the stranger all the way to the kirkyard and watched as the sombre figure made its way through the serried ranks of gravestones to the far side of the cemetery. There, before the stupefied gaze of Rabbi Hexpeckle, the stranger lay down on one of the graves and disappeared. The cobbler rushed over to the grave site where he had seen the stranger vanish. There was no sign of digging nor of any disturbance of any kind. Where had the stranger gone? Hurriedly, the cobbler left a pile of stones on top of the grave as a marker and rushed off to tell everybody about what he had just seen. At first, nobody would believe him. The cobbler must have imagined it. The stranger probably walked out the other side of the graveyard unnoticed. The idea that he had vanished into a grave was quite preposterous after all. Read that again. The idea that he had vanished into a grave was quite preposterous after all. But in spite of all the ridicule, the cobbler persisted with his story, and after a great debate, it was agreed that the grave should be opened. The grave diggers were summoned and the coffin was disinterred. The coffin was then opened in full view of several witnesses. Inside the coffin, they found the body of a man dressed just like the stranger had been and wearing a pair of brand new shoes. The shoes were so beautifully crafted that they could only have been made by Rabbi Hexpeckle. The townspeople had to believe his story now. Nobody really knew what to do next. After some debate, it was decided that the best thing to do was to seal the coffin again and put it back in the grave. Time would tell whether the ghostly stranger was likely to put in another appearance in the future. But before the coffin was reinterred, the cobbler reclaimed the shoes that he had made. They were a fine pair after all, and what use could they be to a dead person? He had made a big mistake. Next morning, before dawn, the neighbors had a rude awakening. Sounds of a terrible struggle were heard coming from Rabbi Hexpeckle's cobbler's shop. Several people who had been disturbed by the thumping and screaming ran to the shop to investigate. They could find nothing except a set of footprints leading from the shop to the graveyard. The footprints led right up to the grave that had been dug up the day before. There was nothing else for it. The grave had to be dug up once again. When the coffin was lifted out and opened, the townspeople shuddered when they saw what lay inside. The corpse, it seemed, had got his new shoes back. There they were on his feet, just as before. Of Rabbi Hexpeck, however, there was no sign apart from a piece of his shirt, which the corpse held in its pallid, decaying fingers. Rabbi Hexpeckle was never seen again. The people of Selkirk were left to wonder, with fear in their hearts, what had happened to the cobbler at the hands of the ghostly stranger. I think that definitely deserves a... What a story. Ba-ba-ba-bum-ba-bum. I think it's time for a beer. What are we up to? 12 minutes. Yeah, I think we're definitely time for a beer. So this is the Help is on the Way Oatmeal Stout. I like the sound of that. 4.2%. So let's give it a go in the magnificent Rush beer glass. Thank you, Kirsten and Steve in the United States. Not bad. Quite like that. The next story, St. Boswell's. The ghostly figure that once haunted the village of St. Boswell's in the Borders is said to have been that of a minister who murdered his housekeeper, but details of the incident are not clear. The identities of the minister and his unfortunate victim are not known. Nor is it known when the murder took place. The ghost, nevertheless, is one that several people are said to have... The ghost, nevertheless, is one that several people are said to have seen over a period of some 20 years at the turn of the 19th century. The spectre of the clergyman, tall, deathly pale, and dressed in black clothing, was seen by a pair of sisters on 2 occasions in the late 1800s. On each occasion, the ghost appeared very clearly, walking along the road for a moment or two. The figure was visible for minutes only. Then, quite suddenly, it seemed to disappear into thin air. Similar sightings were made by various people over the following years, and each time the descriptions of the figure that was seen matched. He was reported to be wearing ecclesiastical clothing, a black frock coat, gaiters, and a black hat shading his eyes. We are up to the last 2 of this particular chapter, and then I think we might go back into colour for the next part of the show. So slange me var. Or do you like the Western Gold honey? Oh, it's delicious. Right. That's how I always used to think that's what whiskey should taste like. Anyway, it's not whiskey, it's bourbon or whatever. So the Tay Railway Bridge. The first bridge that was built for trains to cross the River Tay was long planned. The idea was first proposed by an engineer of the Edinburgh, Perth and Dundee Railway Company in 1854, which is about 6 minutes to 7. Proposal after proposal was discussed and resisted by various bodies involved until, finally, permission was obtained to build a bridge in 1870. The first stone was laid in 1871 and the bridge was completed and open for traffic in 1878. Its life was tragically short. On the 28th of December 1879, the Tay found itself in the teeth of a raging gale. By early evening, officials were in grave doubt as to whether it was safe to allow trains to cross the bridge in such conditions. A train from Edinburgh to Dundee was due to cross the bridge and arrive at 7 o'clock. At the Dundee side, hopes were high that the train had been stopped before it crossed and the passengers disembarked. The minutes passed by after 7 o'clock and the train did not arrive. Staff at the Tay Bridge station, hoping that the train had never tried to cross the bridge, tried to signal to the southern side, but communication was impossible. At length, the dreadful truth came to light. The train had been crossing the bridge when disaster struck. The structure of the bridge had not been strong enough to withstand the stresses that the gale had caused. A portion of the bridge had collapsed and the train had gone down with it. Some 79 people were thought to have lost their lives, but the figure could not be given accurately, for not all the bodies were recovered. On the anniversary of the dreadful disaster, a ghostly train has often been seen to cross the River Tay from south to north, following the line of the doomed bridge. That's pretty much covered in the first book, I believe, that we read on this show, the Book of Railway Ghosts. Did we read that on the show? I can't remember. I'm sure we did. I'm sure during lockdown we read Railway Ghosts. Great book. I read that when I was in hospital 3 years ago. So again, cheers me beers. Oh, slange. Right, the last one for tonight in black and white. Timintoul. Not far from Timintoul, a particularly courteous and helpful ghost has appeared to travellers in the area. She is reported to be an old lady dressed in a long plaid skirt and shawl, accompanied by a wee black dog. In the 1960s, a young couple staying in the district on a trip that combined business with pleasure were returning to their hotel after a pleasant day's sightseeing when the car had a puncture. As they set about changing the wheel at the roadside, a little old lady approached them and asked if she could offer them any assistance. The young couple were touched by her kindness, but turned down her offer politely. They had almost finished their task, and besides, she seemed a little frail to be changing wheels. The lady bid them good evening and passed on, leaving the couple to get on with what they were doing. The job was done in a matter of minutes. They got back into the car and set off on their way once again. They fully expected to pass the old lady a short distance farther along the road and were debating whether or not to offer her a lift. The old lady had not been walking fast, so she cannot have gone very far at all. But in spite of this, and in spite of the fact that there was nowhere else for her to have gone except open countryside, the couple saw neither hide nor hair of her or her dog for the rest of the journey. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Thunderclap. Somewhat reminiscent of my broccoli coombe, goblin coombe encounter from 20 years ago this year. Oh my goodness me. Right, folks, we are going to dispense with the black and white, and we're going to go back to color. So there we go. But we are going to mess around with the warm. Yeah, I quite like warm. Let's just mess around with the let's try vintage. No, I don't like vintage. Let's go warm. And I'll tell you what, we'll increase the vibrance, see what that does. Oh, I like that. No, I don't like that. No, it's gone a bit too blue in the background. Let's try the saturation a bit more. What do you do on Wednesday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Wednesday, and he was messing around with the blessed camera. So saturation, oh, that's not bad. Temperature, we're warming it up a bit. I like that. Yep. Winner, Christmas dinner. Right, beer in a bump. Cheers, me beers. Oh, lovely. Slange. Oh, got some fan mail. Let's see what the fan mail says. Bear with, folks. Right. That's the end of that chapter. So here we are in colour. Signs, prophecies, and curses. The stories in this chapter are not, strictly speaking, all about ghosts, but there are so many tales of ominous occurrences of a supernatural nature that either foretell imminent death or coincide with a death elsewhere that some of them ought to be given a mention. Some of these incidents have already been featured in this book. Oh, the beer hiccups. The mysterious appearance of Mr. Swan, the traveller who visited his family in Edinburgh at the time of his death in foreign parts. The Banshee who appeared to Ewan MacLean the night before the battle at which he met his death. And the drummer of Cortashi, whose mournful drumbeat tells the Ogilvy family that one of them is about to die, or star in Return of the Saint. There are hundreds of similar stories. Indeed, most people have probably heard that similar things have happened to a relative or a friend or the friend of a friend, even in cynical modern times. Along with the occurrences that foretell bad things to come, there are also stories of curses included in this chapter. For what could enable such terrible promises to come true if not some force from another spiritual plane? In some cases, it might be argued that those who have been cursed, because they believe the curse to be true, cause it to be fulfilled themselves, albeit subconsciously. If you believe something will happen, you can make it happen. Oh, I'm going to win the lottery. This may be true. If something is expected of a person, he or she often fulfills these expectations in spite of him or herself. Nevertheless, there are stories of curses that have been fulfilled that are much more complex and far-reaching than any that can be explained away in such a manner. Is it all mere horrible coincidence that such events came to pass? There must be some doubt. The phenomenon of second sight is also given consideration in this chapter. Is it a blessing or a curse? And where does it come from? Bum, bum, bum. Oh, let's have a quick swig of the old bit. Let's just check the time, 24 minutes. So, slange me that. Cheers. Bonnie Dundee. Ominous sight. Two stories have been told about the death of John Graham of Claverhouse, Viscount Dundee, Bonnie Dundee, the persecutor of the Covenanters who was killed at the Battle of Killiecrankie, a landmark in Scottish history. The night before the battle, it is said, as Graham slept, he was disturbed by two things. First, he saw a strange red glow in the darkness, which could not be explained by human activity. This same glow has been reportedly seen by visitors to the site on the anniversary of the battle in years since. Ghostly lights are quite a common phenomenon, as has already been mentioned, both as signs of approaching death, death candles, and as spectral markers of places where bloodshed and death have occurred. The second thing to trouble Graham happened towards the hours of dawn, we are told. He saw a vision of a man by his bed, blood dripping from a head wound. The terrible figure pointed at Graham and cried, "Remember Brown of Priest Hill." Brown of Priest Hill was a man called John Brown, a Covenanter who was killed for his beliefs. It is said that when the men in the firing squad saw Brown's steadfast courage and unfailing religious conviction in the face of imminent execution, they faltered, and Viscount Dundee himself fired the fatal shot. Graham was greatly disturbed by the spectre of Brown of Priest Hill, hoping that what he had seen had not been a ghost, but instead some devious trick by his enemies. He got up and inquired of the sentry whether there had been intruders in the camp. The guard outside, however, said that all had been quiet and that nobody had approached Graham's tent. The figure that Bonnie Dundee had seen had been a sign. Its appearance, along with the eerie red glow, foretold his death in battle the next day. Another person many miles away had a vision to tell him of John Graham's death. He was Lord Balcarres of Collinsborough, and unable to join. He was Lord Balcarres of Collinsborough, unable to join his acquaintance in battle because he was under arrest on the orders of Parliament. On the night after the battle, he was roused from sleep by a sound by his bed. He looked up and saw his comrade, Viscount Dundee, standing by the bed. He rose to greet him, but the figure turned away and then disappeared. It was only later that Lord Balcarres found out that Viscount Dundee had been killed in battle that very day. Thunderclap. Coming up to the 28 minutes, we've got one and more, then it'll be half time. So cheers, me beers. Oh, slange. Right. Sir Walter Scott. Sir Walter Scott had a keen interest in the supernatural, and during his lifetime he witnessed a ghost in his own home. A man from London called George Bullock, now it's true I tell you, was appointed by Scott to take charge of many of the building works at the writer's home, Abbotsford. A man from London called George Bullock was appointed by Scott to take charge of the many building works at the writer's home, Abbotsford. George Bullock died in London in 1818, which is just gone about 6:15, almost come at 6:20, while work was still in progress at Abbotsford, 14 years before the author's own death. On the night of Bullock's death, Scott told of being woken by violent noises in the house. Although it was the middle of the night, it sounded as if builders were at work. Scott got up to investigate, but as he made his way through the house apprehensively, sword in hand, he could find nothing to explain the disturbance. The house was quiet again, and there were no signs of any disturbance. Later, Scott was to discover that the bizarre events coincided with Bullock's death in London. The ghost of Bullock is said to have put in an appearance at Abbotsford on a number of occasions since then. "30 minutes and 39 seconds. That's it. Half time, folks. Oh, delicious. Slange me bar. Right. I am just going to sort out the pictures for half time. Let's find me. There I am. So, what have we been up to today? Yeah, that'll do. Six images. I know we'll do a seventh, and actually we'll do an eighth as well. So, what have we been up to today? Well, it's been a kind of day of two halves. Did some work in the morning when it was cool, It was cool, man. And then in the afternoon, when it started getting a bit hot, beer burps coming up, folks. Let's time this, shall we? At 31, 31 minutes and 55 seconds. There we go. As it started getting hot in the afternoon, I decided that, of course, what I needed to do was go outside and do some gardening in the blazing heat. But no, I didn't. I stayed in the shade as much as I could. So here we go. Let's share this. Share screen, share screen, share screen. Here we go. So these are my sweet peas in these slug and snail proof tubs, because there is a huge kind of overlap on the edge of the pot. Slugs and snails really can't climb up over into the pot. So the number of times that I run my fingers along the edge there and I'm dislodging slugs and snails and rehoming them in the garden. Yeah, there we go. So we have 2 pots of sweet peas with the supports in place. So exciting stuff, everybody. That I do believe is, I think that's Albrecia. Just checking, actually. I'm sure that's Albrecia. What do you do on Friday night? Sorry, edging lobelia, not Albrecia. Edging lobelia. That's in one of the pots. Absolutely brilliant. Now this is Cosmos. I'm channeling my inner Carl Sagan here. What I did there was Derp's catlet tray here. I fished all his turds out, flushed them, and then I was left with some wood chip that smelt a bit strong of pea, but there we go. But I mixed the wood chip with, thank you, Rob. I mixed the wood chip with spent compost, put it in a pot, added some potting compost on top, and then sowed some Cosmos. So there we go. So I wouldn't use spent catlet Cosmos for anything I'm eating, but when it comes to flowers, I Googled it. Yes, you can reuse it. So there we go. And what have we got here? That is I think that's my Sweet William. I'm sure that's my Sweet William. It just says plant here. Goodness me. Come on, Apple. You can do better. I'm sure that's Sweet William. Recents. Here we go. Identify. Sweet William. I thought it was Dianthus barbatus. So that was stuff I sowed last year. It's stayed in the pot there, so it's flowering again. Absolutely brilliant. And that is sorrel. I do believe that is 5-leaved sorrel. Just checks. Pink sorrel, rather. Pink sorrel. There we go. So yeah, we're going to definitely grow more of that. And next, that's a bee on one of my oxeye daisies. Absolutely fabulous. That's a buff-tail bee, would you believe? And that's my friend Jude, but we don't need to see that. So apologies for that. That's me messing around with AI art. So there we go. It's been a good day in the garden. Like I say, we've been a mix of work early in the morning and then getting on with gardening in the afternoon when it's baking hot, quite frankly. But we're able to get on with things. So, a big shout to viewer Damien as well, who's joined us. Hello, Damien. What's the plan for tomorrow? A plan for tomorrow is that I should be having a day out with friend Tara because it's her birthday. Tara, if you don't know, she's going to hate me for reminding people of this, but if it wasn't for Tara, I wouldn't be here. 3 years ago, she was so concerned for my, what's the word I'm looking for? Declining health, that she came round one weekend and found me utterly insensible. Rang 999, ambulance turned up. I went to hospital, and the rest is history. But if Tara hadn't done that 3 years ago, the chances are I would have slipped into a coma and I wouldn't be here. So thank you, Tara. God bless you. Right, let's have the St. Peter's beer, because we get hungry today, I can tell you. This is from Home Bargains, St. Peter's beer, St. Peter's Abbey, Saint Pierre, Belgian Abbey beer, blonde with an E at the end, beer, 6%. Oh my goodness me, this beer doesn't take any prisoners, I can tell you. And it's only £1.29 a bottle, a can rather. Is it £1.29 or £1.39? All I know is it's as cheap as chips, and we loves it great. So, and some more of the Western Gold honey. So, now there was a line I was going to look up at the. There was a line that I was looking up. That was it. I found it. It's all right. I have a singular, pathetic mind of. That was that line about quick and nimble with his fingers, he shod many a fine gentleman around around the town of Selkirk. Yeah, I know, I'm puerile. Free form. Bear with, folks. What did you do on Wednesday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra, but instead, as ever, he was faffing around with his phone. We'll just send that as it is. Right, let's crack on with the ghost stories, because quite frankly, I is girt hungry. That's an understatement. I am massively hungry. So let's top up the St. Pierre beer, and we will crack on with part deux of tonight's fabulous entertainment, he said modestly. So cheers, me beers. Oh, slange. Or slangia. Visions of the Dead in Galloway. I will point out, I think they're referring to the town of Galloway, not the highly contentious and litigious MP. So if you're watching, George, honestly, this is not about you. For a change, it's not about you. Visions of the Dead in Galloway. Two stories that originate from Galloway in southwest Scotland echo the story of Mr. Swan. See a haunted capital, Ann Street. The first story concerns an old man, a smallholder, who was working out in the fields on the hillside one afternoon when he caught sight of his son below him in the distance, heading towards their home. The old man called down to his son, but obviously the lad was too far away to hear him. The old man was consumed with curiosity. His son was a sailor, and the old man was sure that he was supposed to be on a long voyage, still at sea for some weeks to come. All the same, the old man had work to attend to. The potato crop had to be brought in. He hurried on with his task. The sooner he finished, the sooner he would be able to go home and see his son. The old man had finished his work by lunchtime. He hurried back to the cottage to greet his son and hear all his news. But when he got home, there was no sign of the lad. The old man's wife was preparing a meal for 2 people, just as usual. The old man asked whether their son had been home, but his wife said no. The old man decided that his eyes had been deceiving him. He had, after all, been high up on the hillside. What he thought had been the figure of his son was probably just a passerby with a similar appearance. Sometime later, however, the old man and his wife received the tragic news that their son had been killed overseas in an accident at the time at which his father had thought he had seen him. The second story concerns a boy who was staying with his grandparents for the summer. The boy was sitting outside in the yard one afternoon, whittling some wood, when he saw his grandfather come out of the house. The old man paused to watch the boy for a few moments, then, without saying a word, walked off out of the yard towards the fields. The boy remarked to himself that the old man seemed uncharacteristically quiet, but he was too absorbed in what he was doing to give the matter much thought. A few minutes later, the boy went back into the house. He was quite taken aback when he saw that his grandfather was there, sitting in his favorite chair by the fire. Hadn't he just seen the old man walk away from the house dressed in exactly the same clothes? It was the strangest thing. After all, the old man could not be in 2 places at the same time. Had the boy been dreaming, or had his eyes been deceiving him? Quite unexpectedly, the old man fell ill. Quite unexpectedly, the old man fell ill that night, and very shortly afterwards, he died. The boy now understood that when he had seen the figure of his grandfather walking away, he had been forewarned of the old man's departure to another life. Bum, bum, bum. Cheers, me beers. I think this might be a 3 bumper tonight. Oh no, we've got to top up the beer. Well, what do you know? For the second time tonight, we have a dead soldier, and Run VT.
Oh, it's jolly nice of you. Hello, dead soldier. Seen plenty of those in my time.
Exactly. Slange. Oh, we didn't have any wasabi mix at halftime. How remiss of me. We'll have some wasabi mix now, actually. We'll make out half times just happened, so. Oh, lovely. That's the end of the wasabi mix. The wasabi mix is courtesy of friend Faye, who always tells me off for being smutty. And then she says to me, pick up that plate. Why? Pick up that plate. Why? Just pick up the plate. I pick up the plate. What does it say on the plate? Twat. Look at that. Look at that look on her face. I have been played. Walked into that one. Anyway, the cursed mill. Many years ago, near Newton Moor, there was once a mill that was said to be cursed. The curse had been placed on the mill, it was said, by an old witch who had a grievance with the man who owned the mill at that time. The curse wreaked havoc for some years after that. The first miller was killed in a fire. His successor died of a sudden and mysterious illness, after which the mill was burned to the ground. When the mill was rebuilt, the witch's heart softened a little, and she weakened the curse. Now the mill would be safe from further problems, as long as it was left idle for one day every year. Woe betide the miller who dared to use the mill on the forbidden day. Many years later, the mill was bought by an ambitious miller who wanted to expand his business. Is his name Windy? Let's find out. He already owned one mill and wanted to improve his prospects with the purchase of a second one. He did not hold with superstition, nor did he like the mill at Newton Moor standing idle when it could be making more money when he could be making more money from it. The so-called witch was long dead, and the miller could not see what harm she could do from the grave. In spite of the warnings not to do so, the miller prepared to keep the mill working on the forbidden day. Hardly had he set the machinery in motion than there was a terrible grating sound and everything came to a halt. The small amount of meal that had been ground was full of grit, and one of the grinding stones had, incredibly, broken into several fragments. Unwilling to admit that he might have been wrong, the miller denied to all and sundry Unwilling to admit that he might have been wrong, the miller denied to all and sundry that he had had any problems. He quietly arranged delivery of a new grinding stone and carried on working for another year. The next year, the miller was still determined to keep the mill working on the forbidden day. But this time, not one piece of machinery would function in spite of the most careful maintenance. Nothing seemed to be wrong, but all the same, nothing would work. To add to his grief and frustration, the miller discovered that a sudden and voracious plague of rats in his granary had eaten all his corn. The miller had experienced quite enough. He sold the mill, deciding it was better to concentrate all his efforts on the other mill that he owned. His troubles were not over, however. His first mill was destroyed by fire, and he himself took ill and died very soon afterwards. The cursed mill was then taken over by yet another man, a kindly and earnest soul who had taken a young gypsy boy under his wing. They managed to set the mill to rights, and it worked beautifully, making them a good living until the old man died. The gypsy boy left to find a job elsewhere, and another miller stepped in to run the mill. Although the machinery had been well maintained and everything appeared to be in good working order, the mill refused to work properly, and the miller was plagued with problems. The gypsy boy was summoned to give his advice, and much to everyone's amazement, with a tweak here and a twiddle there, he managed to get the mill to work. Nobody could work out how he did it, and yet no sooner had he left the premises than the mill ground to a halt yet again. The miller threw up his hands in despair and left. The gypsy boy returned to the mill to take charge. As long as he was there, the mill worked perfectly well, and he made himself a good living. But after his death, the mill fell into disrepair because of the angry words of an old woman long dead. Nobody else could ever get it to work again. About 52 minutes. Oh my goodness me! Having just had some wasabi mix, I could finish off a whole bag of that right now. Oh, thank you, viewer Faye. Slange. The Curse of Ruthven Valley. The Curse of Ruthven Ferry. Many years ago, the only way to cross the River Spey by Kingussie was by boat. For those who did not have boats of their own, there was a ferry. The ferryman lived in a cottage by the crossing, ready to ferry people over the river for a penny whenever necessary. Oh, the beer burps again. Do apologise. Once, when the weather had been exceedingly stormy and the river was in full spate, the boatman found himself to be much in demand. Communion was being held in the church at Kingussie, and there was quite a crowd waiting to be taken across from the southern bank. Seeing the state of the river and sensing the opportunity to make a sly extra profit, the ferryman instantly raised his price to 6pence. Some people, unable to afford such a sum, shrugged and turned back for home. Others reluctantly paid up, but one old woman stood doggedly on the bank, holding out 1 penny. As far as she was concerned, that was the fare for crossing the river, and she would not pay. As far as she was concerned, that was the fare for crossing the river, and she would pay not a halfpenny more. The ferryman was irritated by the old woman. It was pouring with rain and very cold, but he was in no mood to take pity on her. He told her that if she would not pay full fare, then he could not carry her across. The ferry set out across the water, and the old woman was left on the bank, standing in the rain with her penny still in her hand. The old woman took ill as a result of her ordeal. She had been a stalwart member of the church, and elders of the congregation attended her during her illness and her subsequent death. The ferryman, taking one of the elders across the river after the old woman had died, found himself subjected to a ferocious tirade. For having been selfish and greedy in the extreme, for having so callously refused to take the old woman across to her place of worship, he would suffer from here to eternity. He would be deprived of his living and die an unnatural death, impoverished and miserable. I think we call that Brexit these days. The words that the elder had spoken came true. Things took a bad turn for the ferryman when a bridge was erected over the river shortly afterwards. The ferryman lost his only means of earning a living, and now that he was unable to pay his rent, he lost his cottage too. He scraped a meagre living doing odd jobs for people in the district for a while, until one day, cleaning out some pigsties for a miller nearby, he mysteriously fell to his death from the top of the mill into a pigsty. When his body was recovered, it had been half eaten by the pigs. Oh, that reminds me of an episode of the excellent television series called Millennium, which was a sort of X-Files spin-off. It wasn't a spin-off. There was a bit of a crossover with the X-Files, but it was Lance Henriksen as former FBI agent Frank Black. But there was an episode in that where a guy essentially falls into a pigsty and is eaten by pigs. Oh my goodness me. Millennium, what a great series. Absolutely. Just brilliant. Right, we're up to 58 minutes. We need to finish here. We've got one story here which is massively too long to read tonight. So what we'll probably do is we'll jump ahead to the end of the chapter, then we'll go back and read that one on Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Friday. 58 minutes. Cheers me, Biz. Second Sight. I knew it would be Second Sight. Second sight is reckoned by some people to be a gift, but according to others, in particular those on whom this gift has been bestowed, the faculty is more of a burden than a gift. Characteristically, a vision of second sight is something that comes unbidden, and when it comes, it is often unwelcome. The things that people with second sight see, or at least the impressions with which they are left, are rarely pleasant ones. Some people who are said to have try it again, one more run up of that. Some people who are said or have been said to have second sight may have only one vision in their lifetime. For this, they are generally quite thankful. Others, however, have several episodes, whether these appear to the individual as visions, dreams, or intuition. The faculty of second sight is often one that is shared by successive generations of one family. And there are numerous accounts of Scots, particularly Highland folk, who have been found to have the gift. These people are, in general, very much everyday folk with everyday occupations who just happen to see certain things that others cannot see. Yeah, we are going to jump ahead. This one is far too long to read tonight. So we're going to jump ahead to the next one. Next, I think. Cheers, me biz. We have just careened through the hour mark. And in the magnificent United Federation of Planet Shot Glass, again courtesy of friends Kirsten and Steve in the United States, slange me bar. Second sight, a ghostly gift. This story concerns another seer, Kenneth Ure of the Lewes, and how he came to acquire his gift. When Kenneth was not yet born, his mother was out in the fields one night when she saw the ghost of a dead woman. The spirit was soaking wet, her clothes were dripping, and she was clearly in great distress. Kenneth's mother realized who the ghost must be. The body of an unknown woman had been washed ashore nearby a few weeks before. The islanders had been unable to find out who the woman was or how she had come to drown, but had buried her body. Kenneth's mother was very frightened by the ghost's appearance, but in spite of this, she felt sorry for her. She was obviously very unhappy. She asked the ghostly woman why she was crying. It turned out that the ghost was unable to rest in peace. She was a stranger to the Highlands, and as the grave in which she had been buried had not been bought, she had not got the right to lie in Highland soil. Kenneth's mother wanted to help, and accordingly she placed a handful of corn from the fields on the woman's grave. This would be payment for the burial spot. The ghost was thankful that she could now rest in peace, and as a gesture of gratitude, she handed Kenneth's mother a beautiful black stone with the following instructions. Give this stone to your firstborn son on the 7th anniversary of his birth. No sooner, no later. The ghost then lay down, finally at peace. Kenneth was his mother's firstborn son, and on his 7th birthday, she handed him the stone that the ghost had given her. From that day onwards, Kenneth was able to see things that others could not, and to prophesy events that were to happen far into the future. The gift of second sight was something that, in this case, had come from beyond the grave. Right, the last one from this chapter tonight, and like I say, we will go back to this Gert Long story on Friday. So, in fact, I just realised on Friday we do need to read a ghostly almanac of Devon and Cornwall as well. So, going to be a full show, folks. So, slangs we are. Oh, cheers, me beers. Right, the last from this one tonight. The Curse of Alloa Tower. Alloa Tower stands bleakly empty nowadays, a haven for rodents and nesting birds, and a magnet for vandals who have left their handiwork on the boards that cover up the doors and windows. The dereliction of the place adds to the air of grimness that surrounds it, but its proud, tall walls and castellated turrets remain intact, as if making one last determined stand against the curse on the Erskines, Earls of Mar, the family who once owned it. The beer burps again, do apologise. Actually, before we go any further, we are going to look up Alloa Tower. Alloa Tower, Scotland. Sorry, bear with, folks. We're just going to bring up some images of Alloa Tower. I thought we had one just then. Images. Come on. Oh, this is most vexing that every time I bring up an image of Alloa Tower and I go to bring the image up on screen, it cuts to something else. So Alloa Tower. Right, we're actually on. Right, okay, we can do this one. What did you do on Friday, on a Wednesday night? I tuned in to watch Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Wednesday, and instead was confronted with a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head, faffing around trying to find perfect images of Alloa Tower. Right, here we go. Alloa Tower. Let's get rid of that. Share screen. There we go. This is what we're talking about. Alloa Tower. There it is, Alloa Tower. So let's try again. Alloa Tower stands bleakly empty nowadays, a haven for rodents and nesting birds, and a magnet for vandals who have left their handiwork on the boards that cover up the doors and windows. The dereliction of the place adds to the air of grimness that surrounds it, but its proud, tall walls and castellated turrets remain intact, as if making one last determined stand against the curse on the Erskines, Earl of Mar, the family who once owned it. Exactly when the terrible curse was first uttered is uncertain. Some sources believed it to date from the 16th century. At that time, the Abbey of Cambusc Kenneth was destroyed by the Earl of Mar, and some people believe that it was the abbot who pronounced the curse upon the family. When it was pronounced and by whom do not matter as such, as the horrifying manner in which the events followed to bring about the demise of the Erskines exactly as the curse had promised. The curse promised the following things. The family would become extinct. The estates of the Erskine family would fall into the hands of strangers. One of the Erskines would live to see his home, a place where a king was raised, ravaged by fires. He would see his wife die in the burning house. 3 of that man's children would never see the light of day. The great hall of his house would become a place for stabling horses. A weaver would work in the chamber of state. The curse would only have ended when a sapling, an ash, was seen to grow from the top of the tower. The words took some time to be fulfilled, but in 1715, which is 5:15, things took a bad turn for the Erskine family. They were stripped of their titles as punishment for supporting the Old Pretender. Their lands were confiscated. In 1801, Alloa Tower caught fire. John Francis Erskine, the owner at that time, had to witness his wife dying in the flames. This must have been a devastating loss to a man who had already known great pain in his life. Three of his children had been born totally blind. A few years later, the Great Hall was taken over by a troop of cavalry who made use of what once. A few years later, the Great Hall was taken over by a troop of cavalry who made use of what had once been the Great Hall to stable their horses. Some years after that, a weaver who had fallen upon hard times took refuge in the damaged building. He continued working at his craft in the Chamber of State in the tower. Around 1820, the sign came that the curse had run its course. An ash sapling took root in what remained of the roof of Alloa Tower. our tower there, folks. Let's hit the... Right, we have a girt long one to read, which for next time, which is the Brahan Sia, but we'll keep that for Friday. So, cheers me beers. Delicious. Slange. Deliciouser. So, fingers crossed. We'll be back for Friday for, brace yourselves, Sunday Night Ghost Stories Extra on a Friday. Until then, it behoves me to say thank you for watching. Why? Why not? What else are you going to do on a Wednesday night towards the end of May than watch a confused man from Dudley with holes in his head, drink ghost stories, and read alcohol? God bless you if you can think of something better to do, because I do appreciate the patronage. So until next time, as ever, thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay out of trouble, and please don't have nightmares. Good night.